All right, so I'm so glad you all could make it here tonight. This is LLM to lawyer. And the reason why I put this together, well, I was originally inspired by, I woke up one morning and um, one of our, uh, one guy in our cohort, Oscar, he put up a link to Caroline's LinkedIn, Caroline Paz, who's a speaker here tonight, to her LinkedIn, where she was saying, why firms, why courts should hire LLMs. And I'm like, yes, it felt like it was the first time we got some real love because it's hard. It's hard. And it's been challenging. But when I say it's hard, I don't mean to say that to discourage other people who are coming up, but it's a different path than if you're a JD. And I'm sure that those of you who've been through this process will attest to that. So again, my name is Angela Mackey Rutledge. I'm the president of the Graduate Law Students Association, and basically, this was an association that I.
Hello.
Hello, hi, hi. We've started, so I'm just giving an introduction now. This is an association I started to really advocate for LLM students because I don't think this is particular to George Mason University, but it does seem that JDs get all the love and LLMs tend to be second-class citizens, especially when it comes to career services. Sometimes we just get the droppings of what the JDs have, and I do feel like they would chew off their arm to get a JD a position over us sometimes. But um, in any case, so I've put together this panel tonight. So those who have made the jump from being LLM students to working in law can like tell us how they did it, because I want to know, how did you do it? Because I am in a spot where I have been hired by a court, so we will see how it goes. Um, I've got some. I'm not sure about it only because it's a career clerk position rather than a judicial one. So that's a whole other thing. But we're going to have we will be having a one of the other seminars that we're doing on Zoom. In I think our next one is judicial clerkships.
Clerkship.
So, all right. Uh, okay. So, without further ado, our first speaker. Now, you may or may not recognize her because she was part of the Black Hair Big Law symposium that I put together last October. And she made the jump. So I'm going to read you her bio here. So Rachel Boyce is a transactional attorney focusing her practice on financings, acquisitions, joint ventures, purchases, sales, corporate reorganizations, and commercial leasing. She also works on property finance, debt finance, and general corporate matters, and advises clients in prop tech. Prior to entering private practice, Ms. Boyce worked at the World Bank and the Inter-American Development Bank in Washington, D.C., where she focused on financing projects, rural development, and property rights, and co-authored several publications. Ms. Boyce also advised government ministers and other officials in Latin America and the Caribbean on finance and projects centered around promoting economic growth. Ms. Boyce is an advocate for diversity and equality. She provides pro bono services, pro bono assistance to minority-owned and founded tech startups, and she defends underrepresented minorities facing eviction. Rachel is an active participant in the California Minority Counsel program and the Bar of San Francisco. So while she was a student at Berkeley, she also volunteered at the East Bay Community Law Center and the Berkeley Immigration Group. So Rachel currently sits on multiple nonprofit boards, including Child Care Law Center and the Bay Ganda Foundation. So in her free time, she explores the authenticity of the world. She seeks out new hiking trails. She engages in philanthropic activities, and she indulges in everything Caribbean. Um, so she was also featured in I don't know if any of you saw it, but it was we played it during Black Hair Big Law. She was featured in the Law 360 video about Black women wearing their natural hair in when at the law firm, and it's a really good video. And that video sort of inspired me to do Black Hair Big Law. So without further ado, Rachel.
Hello, can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
I feel the same as you. Like after 3 years of Zoom, it's like, does it still work? Does it not work? So I get it. It's so nice to be here.
Right. So, Rachel, can you tell us like where you start? Like, so you've done this jump. Where did you start off? So, when you did, I guess you did an LLB, but before you did your LLB, did you do something else before the LLB, or how did you? I guess I want to know, how did you get here? And
Um,
why are you here?
um, that's an interesting question. I know. I guess I'm here living my purpose. I hope. I hope I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. But in terms of the jump from LLB to LLM, I did that, right? I did prior studies before the LLB, but I want to be careful to say that I don't know that it's always necessary to have done prior degrees. Sometimes, depending on your jurisdiction, you can just go straight into a law program and then do an LLM. But for me, my path was different. So I did undergrad in the Caribbean, in Jamaica. I did an undergraduate degree. Then I went on to do my master's, and that kind of took me into the area of international development, where I spent some time in DC, as you mentioned. And while I was there, I wanted to do more. And I personally wanted to study something where I it was more of a career focused program and not just something that causes you to depend on opportunity, right? And I say that because with law, you want opportunity to get you to the next step, but no matter what, you're still a lawyer, right? If you pass the bar, you're still a lawyer, and nothing changes that. You can, worst case, you can set up your own practice and figure it out. But I think a lot of other professions which are not specifically career focused, you have to depend on opportunities, you have to depend on people and mentorship and all of these things to stay relevant. And there's a lot of, we've spoken about this before, but there's plagiarism, I mean, discrimination and a lot of different things that happens in these areas. And if you're not aligned with the right people, you can just fall by the wayside and never really get the opportunities you deserve. So that's kind of why I wanted to pivot into the legal field. That brought me to California. I did my LLM at Berkeley, and I knew from there that I wanted to go into big law. And I agree with you. There's just not enough attention placed on young attorneys who are trying to get into big law. There's just almost no path for us. You have to create your own path, and it looks so different for everyone because everyone is trying to figure it out in different ways, and there's just not information that really tells you this is how you get there, right? Some people are more fortunate than others, and some people strike it lucky and others don't. So I really appreciate that you're doing this and providing some information for students at your school at how to do it. But yeah, I went to Berkeley, and my path was just networking. I took school very seriously. I wanted to get good grades, but I also found time to network and meet people. I always knew when there was a partner from a big law firm coming to do a presentation or just sit on a panel, and I was there in the front row, hoping to have 5 minutes with them after their presentation, or just to talk to them. And to the extent that they weren't able to be helpful, I would always ask, like, well, who can be, right? Like, who's in your practice group that or at your firm that I can talk to further about this particular interest that I have? So I think that was kind of my path. it doesn't necessarily have to be like that where you need to have 4 degrees before getting into big law. I did an LLB before an LLM. It's not always that journey, but that was my journey, and it somehow worked out that way.
Okay, I've got a few questions. So, one, how did you pick? All right, okay. One, how are your LLB grades? Mine were pretty atrocious, but I was still lucky that I could get into a LLM program. But how are your LLB grades? How seriously did you take that? And then how did you select Berkeley? And how did you know you were going to go to California? And then how did you study for the California bar?
Oh wow! I hope I remember all these questions, but if I don't, please just remind me, and I'll be sure to cover them all. I took my LLB very seriously as well, so I got good grades there, and I wasn't worried about being able to get into a LLM program. Because as I said, I knew that that was going to be like one of my last opportunities to really pivot, do something meaningful, and not have any regrets, right? And I was paying for it out of pocket. I think that helps sometimes. Like when you're paying for school out of pocket, you're going to take this seriously because this is your own money or your own student loans, and you're fully responsible for it. So that was my story. I didn't have a scholarship for either the LLB or the LLM. And then I was very selective about the LLM schools that I applied to, though. It's here in the US, there's the reality that schools matter. In some places it doesn't. Once you have a degree, you're fine. But here, the school that you go to matters. The reputation of the school, where the school is located, all of these things matter for your career. And so I didn't go on this like application spree that some people do where they're applying for 100 schools. I just applied to a few schools in the top 10 of the US News, right? And Berkeley was one of them. I got into Berkeley, I got into Cornell, I got into Georgetown, and that was kind of like my top three. I applied to others, I didn't get in, the Harvards, the Yales, whatever. But I was very selective, and I said, okay, you're going to apply to 5 or 6 schools in the top 10, and you're going to make it your best application ever, and you're going to hope it works out. But and I'm not saying that other schools don't have value, right? Like they do. And all of the programs are so rigorous and so great. I just felt like adding, on top of everything, adding that I was a diverse candidate and how hard it is for minorities to just survive and get really good opportunities. It was hard. So I personally took a very selective approach where I'm like, I'm going to apply for these schools. I'm going to hope it works out, and I'm gonna try to do whatever it takes to make it work. And that's just kind of how it happened for me. Um, the bar, I think that was part of your question. Oh, that was a mess. I did the California bar. It was hard, but I told myself, this is one and done. You're doing this once. And I just pretended like my life depended on it. I mean, maybe it did, because I took the California bar the year before my 30th birthday. So I'm like, I said to myself, like, and my birthday would have been in February 30th one. So I'm like, do you want to spend your 30th birthday retaking the bar? Like, you do not. You actually don't. You want to be somewhere like enjoying this part of your life. So, and for other reasons, I wanted a job, and a lot of law firms, if you don't pass the bar the first time, they're kind of like done with you, right? Like, not all of them. Some of them do give you second and third chances, but there are a few that just are kind of like you're already being tested for being an LLM. You don't want to add another test of like not passing the bar, right? You're trying really to just make it work. So I just put all my time and energy into making sure I passed. I took bar Bree because people said it was the best one, and I'm like, okay, let's do this. And found myself a study buddy, and we just cranked for whatever, 2.5 months, 3 months,
Wow.
whatever it took. And I mean, it wasn't easy. It was sometimes 15, sometimes 18-hour days, right? Like as we got closer, it got more intense, but it was like, you want to do this once, or you want to do this more than once? And for me, more than once wasn't really something I wanted to explore.
Okay, so I guess wrapping up, I guess what I want to know is what was the secret sauce? Like you got into Cooley, right? And like what happened? Did like I know it was like your hard work and your networking, but did the fairies show up? Did like was it a magical day? Like how did you make that connection to get, or did you have OCIs there? Because that's one thing that we don't have at George Mason
No. No,
for
nobody at
LLM.
no LLM has that OCI. Hardly. We don't, and it's unfortunate. For me, so one thing is that I didn't start at Cooley. I got into Cooley, and I started at another law firm first. And it's interesting that an LLM called me today to talk, and I was telling her the same thing. Like once you're in a law firm, if you want to be in big law, fine, but it doesn't always have to be a big law firm. Like sometimes the market dictates where you can go, and this is a very interesting time. But I was at a law firm that was a little bit smaller than Cooley, still big law, and then I lateraled over. But once you're in a law firm and you're doing well, the lateral jump is much easier because no one really is concerned about whether you were an LLM or, I mean, these things will come up and may show up, but that's the least of their worries. They're worried about what type of work were you exposed to? What did you do? What is your vision for yourself? Like it's very different, and how much, it's a law firm, the economics of it, how much they can get out of you. And so that's how I got into Cooley, from a lateral transfer from another big law firm. But in the first one, that was just networking, right? Like talking to people and making sure that, I would close every conversation with one person with, if you can't help me, can you recommend or refer me to one or two people that I can talk to? And I just kept this snowballing thing going, until I think the person that hired me at my prior law firm, they were probably 3 or 4 degrees
Wow.
connection as like this person, then that person introduced me to that person and that person. And then finally I got in front of this partner who I didn't even know at the time was a hiring partner. And so she had the power to do all these things. But you show up to all these interviews, you sell yourself, you talk about what you can offer. And that's something that I really want to emphasize, just based on the other conversation I had today with an LLM. Like, be so certain about what you want to do and the value you're going to add to that practice, because sometimes there's a lot of things we can do, and we are so smart as LLMs. Most of us have worked before and have all these different things that we can and bring to the table. But when you're going to a big law firm, you're not necessarily telling that partner, I want to do debt finance and corporate and litigation and all. Like you've got to be so sure on what exactly you want to focus on, so that they can see the value add. Don't There's a lot you can do, sure, and I'm sure given the opportunity we can do anything. But I think it's really important to be mindful of what exactly you can do to contribute to that practice, know exactly who you're talking to in the practice, so that you are aligning your goals with their goals, and perhaps it could be a good match. So I got in my first firm like that, and then after about a year and a half, 2 years, I just transferred over to Cooley because I wanted to do something a little bit more specific that Cooley was offering. And yeah.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate your contribution here, and also your contribution again for Black Hair Big Law and the video you were in. It was all great and all really inspiring. So thank you, thank you, thank you.
And I'll stick around. So if people have questions after, I'll
Yeah,
be around.
if you could put in the chat, like if you wouldn't mind a few LLM students contacting you for a follow-up or advice or
You can always find me on LinkedIn and
LinkedIn.
and
Okay.
reach out to me. Yeah, LinkedIn might be better now, or even email. I know you know this, but I start my mat leave tomorrow, so I don't
Oh,
know
that's
how much
right.
I don't know how much I'll be connected to email, but I'll probably still find time for LinkedIn and other social media things to the extent.
Congratulations on the baby.
Thank you. So, but for sure, like there's never an LLM that reaches out to me that I wouldn't respond to, because I've been in your shoes and I know how hard it is. So you can always reach out to me. Forgive me if it takes a little bit longer to respond, but I've been there, and I will be more than happy to share any insight at another time.
Okay, that's brilliant.